How's it going, everyone? Lately, there's been a lot of talk in Canada that Donald Trump's rhetoric and policies towards Canada, like 51st state tariffs, that could actually be boosting the popularity of the Liberal Party in the polls. That would be ironic because the whole Trump-Canada conflict started as a conflict between Trump and the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, who's also the Prime Minister right now. But a look at the data actually makes it clear that there doesn't seem to be a correlation between Trump's rhetoric and liberals gaining popularity. Liberals seem to be gaining popularity for a different reason, and we'll show what that reason is. At the same time, though, the data shows us why there is an illusion of Trump's rhetoric and policies boosting the popularity of the liberals, and it's a very interesting illusion and has to do with a classic error in data analysis, which is confusing correlation with causality. So let's get into that. The chart in front of us right here shows the popularity of the different political parties during different polls over the course of the past year. The blue is the Conservative Party, the red is the Liberal Party, and the orange is the NDP party, which is a party more left-wing than the Liberals. Now, we see that throughout the past year, Conservatives are kind of bouncing around the low 40s throughout 2024. Liberals are kind of in like mid to high 20s, usually mid 20s. And then what happens in the beginning of December? Okay, end of November, that's when Trump and Trudeau met at Mar-a-Lago. Early December, that's when reports started coming out that they had some sort of dispute. Trump started calling Trudeau governor, referring to Canada as the 51st state. What happens with Liberal support? It actually drops. Okay, it was bouncing around the mid-20s for the whole year, and then starting in early December, they actually drop to their lowest point, 21, where they're, for all purposes, tied with the NDP at 19, right? That's the lowest point the Liberals reach. So Liberal popularity actually goes down after the clash with Trump begins. Now, in early January, Liberal popularity shoots up. And it actually shoots up to 29, which is more popular than they've been the whole past year, right? Because they were bouncing around the mid-20s. And then suddenly, after early January, boom, they shoot up to 29. Now, what happens in early January? Well, they even have it on this chart here. There's this little triangle here, and it says Trudeau resigns. Now, he didn't actually resign. This is from 338 Canada, by the way. They look at many different political polls that happened. Trudeau didn't resign. He said he will resign once the Liberal Party selects a new leader, and he's not going to run in the next election, which is going to happen at some point this year. So Trudeau says he's going to resign, and that's when Liberal popularity starts increasing. Okay, so it looks like the issues with Trump actually make Liberals less popular, and it's Trudeau saying he's going to resign that makes Liberals more popular. Now, a couple things to point out here. As the Liberals are increasing in their popularity, two other things are happening. The Conservative popularity drops, and the NDP popularity drops. Probably both of those things contribute to the Liberal rise in popularity. But what seems to be contributing more? Okay, look at Conservative popularity. It's bouncing around the low 40s throughout the whole year. Then in the start of December, right after the issues with Trump start, that's when their popularity starts to increase. And then Trudeau says he's going to resign, and Conservative popularity returns where? Back to the low 40s, which is where it was throughout the whole year, right? So this recent Conservative drop is just a return to normal for them. Now, what's happening with the NDP? They're bouncing around the high teens throughout the past year, and then after Trudeau says he's going to resign, NDP drops to the lowest point they've been in, 15%. So it looks like the change in NDP support is more of a significant phenomena than the change in Conservative support, which really isn't a change, but just a return to normal. All right, so it looks like you had a lot of NDP supporters who really actually liked the Liberals, but They didn't like Trudeau. Once Trudeau said he's going to resign, they said, okay, well, now we'll vote for Liberals instead of NDP. Now, there is a counter argument here. Okay, one could say that, well, early December, when Trump started his rhetoric, people were taking it as a joke. There were no tariffs. People weren't taking it seriously. So this drop in Liberal popularity is for some other reason. Okay, what happens in early January? Well, actually, late January, Trump took power. People started taking the annexation rhetoric more seriously. The tariffs issue started coming up. And so that could have contributed to the Liberal rise in popularity, along with the fact that Trudeau said he was going to resign. Okay? Now, that counter-argument, it might be true, but it has a certain weakness. And we're about to see that weakness when we look into why there might be the illusion that Trump's rhetoric and policies makes the Liberals more popular. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this poll right here. Okay, Abacus data. Okay, this poll was conducted around early to mid-February. And we're going to look at it for two reasons. Okay, one reason, it's got 3,000 data points. 3,000 is the sample size. And for a country the size of Canada, with lots of different regions, you want a large sample size because you want a large sample size for every single region. Okay, so this poll broke down Canada into 6 different regions. Some people break it down into 5 different regions. But look, you got Atlantic Canada, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia. You've got a sample size of 3,000. Divide that by 6, that's 500. So on average, each region has a sample size of about 500. Realistically, the more high population regions, Quebec, Ontario, should have a higher sample size. But on average, sample size of 500 for each region sounds pretty reasonable. But the other very important reason we're looking at this poll in particular is because it asked top issues facing Canada. Okay, what are the 3 most important issues facing Canada today? Please select 3 issues. Okay, so people were able to select 3 issues. 62% of those polled picked rising cost of living as one of those 3 issues. That's a majority of Canadians. Okay, what's number 2 on the list here? Donald Trump and his administration, 42%. Okay, second place, 42% of Canadians picked that as one of their top 3 issues. But that means that 58% of Canadians didn't even pick it in their top 3. Okay, 58% is a clear majority, right? Majority of Canadians don't consider Donald Trump and his administration as even one of the top 3 issues facing Canada. In fact, that's the case for every single issue other than the rising cost of living, right? Rising cost of living is the only issue for which a majority of Canadians picked it as one of their top 3. Now, some of these other issues also have to do with rising cost of living, right? You've got housing affordability and accessibility. You've got the economy. You've got job security and unemployment. You've got inequality and poverty. So there's other issues that are connected to rising cost of living that were also selected here, although, so clearly that's the main thing people care about, right? What's very interesting is the next chart I'm about to show you. So this has to do with the previous chart. Which party do you think would do best on all of these issues? Okay. Now look what it says here, among those who selected the issue in their top 3. So for immigration, for example, right, you have 63% believe conservatives would have the best immigration policy. That's not 63% of those polled. That's 63% of those who picked immigration as one of their top 3 issues. Okay, crime, you have 59% say conservatives would have the best policy on crime. That's not 59% of those polled. That's 59% of those who picked crime as one of their top 3 issues, and so on. Now, what do we see with all of these issues is that for all of them except for 2, the conservatives are considered better than everyone else, than anyone else. Now, that in itself is not surprising, right? Because if we look at that same poll, in every single demographic, conservatives are either tied with liberals or they're the most popular. Okay, in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, considering margin of error, conservatives and liberals are tied. Everywhere else, Conservatives are far ahead. Okay, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta. We're going to mention Alberta later on. This is going to be important. British Columbia, because look at Alberta, 74%. That's huge support for Conservatives. Breakdown by male or female voters, right? Both groups prefer Conservatives. Breakdown by age, right? 18 to 29, 30 to 44, 45 to 49, 60 plus. All age groups prefer Conservatives too, right? So it's not surprising that for most of these issues, all but two of those issues, people think Conservatives will have better policies than the other parties. But what are the two issues where people think Conservatives will not be the best? Climate change and Trump. Now, climate change, it's interesting because the number one party is actually not Other, which would include the Green Party. The number one party is actually Liberals, not Greens. That's interesting. But for Trump as well, Liberals are the most popular party. Those who selected Trump as one of the top three issues, 37% of them, more than anybody else, right? They believe Liberals would be the best at handling that. Okay? So, if that's the case, right, if this poll represents how people really do feel, what do people witness walking around Canada? Well, they notice that those who are more likely to express concern about Trump are also most likely to support the Liberals than any one of the other parties. They also see, walking around Canada, that Liberal popularity is rising. And they also notice, listening to the news, that the Trump-Canada conflict is being talked about more than before. Well, because there was no conflict before, right? And what do they conclude? They conclude, oh, it looks like the issues with Trump are making the Liberals more popular, right? So it's clear why this illusion would happen, right? There's a strong correlation here between concern for Trump and support for Liberals. And that happens to be occurring at the same time as Liberals are gaining in the polls. But what we see from this timeline here is that when the issues with Trump started, Liberals dropped in the polls, and it's after Trudeau said he's going to resign that Liberals started rising in the polls. Okay, so yeah, there's a correlation, but the causality seems to be pretty weak. Right? Now, we talked about our counter-argument, which is that, well, around the time that Trudeau said he's resigning, that's also shortly after that when you had the tariffs issues coming in, people started taking annexation concerns more seriously, right? So maybe people started rallying behind the Liberals thinking, well, maybe they actually will be the best people to deal with Trump. One of the counter-arguments was that, well, the issues between Canada and Trump started as issues between Canada and the Liberals, right? So that seems strange, right? Why people would think Liberals would be the best to handle it. The other thing is, remember we talked about Alberta over here, right? With the Canadian federal government, busy finding a new leader, the premiers of the different provinces started negotiating directly with the Americans, and the one who seems to have had the most success is actually Alberta's Conservative premier, Danielle Smith, right? And clearly Conservatives are very popular in Alberta, so it seems like Canadians would think that Conservatives could be the best at handling Trump. Especially the Trump issues have to do with the economy. And Canadians are clearly very concerned about the economy. And when it comes to the economy, people, 49% think that Conservatives will handle it best. Cost of living, again, 41% think Conservatives will handle it best. Job security, unemployment, housing, right? People think Conservatives will handle that best. So what's going on here? Well, what's going on here is that the causality seems to be reversed. It's not that being concerned about Trump causes people to support the Liberals. It's that supporting the Liberals causes people to be more concerned about Trump. Okay, people who support the Liberals tend to be more concerned about Trump. Now, that actually makes perfect sense. Because the issues between Trump and Canada started as issues between Trump and the Liberal Party. Trump himself is more on the conservative end of the political spectrum, which is opposite of the liberals. So it just makes perfect sense. Okay? So that's what's going on here. That's why there's the illusion that Trump is boosting liberal support. But that's not what's going on. Liberal support seems to be going up for a different reason. But Trump concern correlates with liberal support because people who support the liberals tend to be more concerned about Trump. And that's it. It's a very classic error in data analysis where people confuse correlation with causality. And we see it very clearly laid out here. So it's a very interesting data analysis example. I hope you enjoyed that, and until next time.